Hi. Um, I'm back, being awkward again. For some reason, I don't really have that big of a problem with eye contact, I think, but I seem to have problem keeping my eyes on the camera. Like, it just makes me feel really awkward. So, I don't know if that's an autistic thing, but I'm not really trying to get into that. I am trying to get into some autism spectrum stuff, and this is just something I've been thinking about recently because it's been coming up again, like I talked about in my last video. Um, just being, just having a lot of sensory stimulus and a lot to do and not great sleep, etc. All these things having to do with being a parent now. Um, these things are just cropping back up to an extent that they haven't in a long time. So I'm thinking about it. So what I wanted to talk to you about today is this idea of relevance for an autistic person. And I don't mean relevance as in cultural relevance. I mean engaging in a specific conversation in a way that is fairly precisely relevant to like what is being talked about, what is the purpose of this interaction, what is the topic at hand. Because from my point of view, and I do believe this is an autistic thing, people get off track a lot. People get neurotypical people are often throwing out things that, to me seem very irrelevant, but they seem to need. And when I when I try to stick to the topic, it's often perceived as rude or mean. And I mean, it seems like neurotypical people need to be kind of constantly reminded that, of your connection with them, of like, I care about you, I have these feelings about you. And if you're not actively expressing that, especially if you are disagreeing with them or criticizing something they've said or done, even in a very light way, even just something that's very minor, and there's no anger, it's not a personal attack, it's just, I don't think that's correct, or this had this effect, so maybe we shouldn't do that again, or whatever. People get very offended, and it's confusing, for me. I mean, intellectually, I understand that people need this, but when I'm sort of mentally exhausted, it doesn't occur to me, and it makes even less sense than it normally would. So people bring up a topic and I respond to that topic, and then people are very upset if I'm not couching everything in terms of, oh, I really care about you, and I really agree with you about all of these things, and, kind of sugarcoating it instead of just saying what I feel, or not even really what I feel, what I think. And then there's a lot of assumptions about what my intention is. That, oh, if I'm saying that, it must be because I'm angry, or because I'm trying to tear that person down, or just like all of this stuff. And I think part of this isn't just a matter of autistic, neurotypical. I think part of this is cultural, because I know in some cultures it's considered a lot more acceptable to be blunt about things, and it's not necessarily perceived as you're angry at that person or anything like that. It's very common to just bluntly say things in a spirit of love and, connection. And it's not something that people take offense to. They understand that there's no offense intended necessarily, right? So yeah, this is just something I've been coming up against a lot, especially online, and I think this is because it's a text-based medium, I mean, to me, it's like if I'm reading the words on a screen, it's even more like my brain is focused on precisely what's being said and trying to respond in a way that is precise and is relevant and has a clear argument that I'm making if I'm trying to make a case for something or a clear statement. There's also this issue too, this is again related to relevance, where and I'm wondering if other autistic people out there have this experience a lot, because I sure do, especially online. It's not as frustrating to me in person because I understand how people can read into things in person because of body language and facial expression and tone of voice. I understand more how people can, what's the word? My brain has not been thinking of words very well lately. Not imply, but infer. People infer all of this stuff. And I get that, because there's a lot more input, right? There's all of this other sensory input. But when it's just words on a page, I get frustrated that people infer so much into what I'm saying. So I'll make a statement that's very clear, and it's very precise, and I mean what I said, and I said what I mean. I'm not trying to say other things. I'm not trying to veer off into a similar topic. I'm not trying to say something that other people who might share the opinion I stated also think, because I may not agree with those people, or I may just not be trying to have that conversation. I'm just saying exactly what I said. And it's really frustrating to me that so many neurotypical people will look at a statement, a very clear, simple statement, and read all this stuff into it and basically treat me as though I said all of these things that I didn't say, that aren't implied by what I said, that don't follow from what I said, but are sort of vaguely related, or that people bring up these emotional reactions to related topics and then start making these arguments to me. I'm like, this isn't relevant. Why is this the conversation now? Like, why are we moving the goalpost here? And I think that's all of this is related to why autistic people, and I know that there's an extent to which this is a stereotype, but I think it's a stereotype for a reason, that so many autistic people are attracted to math and the sciences, logic-based things, because we tend to see things, I don't want to say in a black and white way, because I think we're very, very capable of nuance, maybe more than a lot of people actually. But we tend to process things in a very logical way. And when things don't seem to follow from the information that we have, and neurologically we don't have all of the same information, so there's that too, we're confused, and I think I'm guessing for a neurotypical brain, it's kind of like there's all of this stuff that their brain's picking up on, all of this stuff that maybe my brain doesn't pick up on all of it. And it's being processed at hyper speed, so they're not thinking about these things. They're just automatic impressions that they're getting about the world and about things that are being communicated. And maybe not all of those things, I think maybe when they're inferring something into what I've said that I didn't put there, that I didn't intend, they're following a pattern of, usually when people say this, they mean that. And they're not thinking about it. It's just an automatic thing. And, I get that because I explicitly do that sometimes too. Like, I notice a certain kind of argumentation and I can identify it as like, oh, that's something that this person would say. And so then I have that impression and that assumption. But I think maybe for me, this is happening on a somewhat more explicit level, where I'm like consciously making that leap. And I think maybe for neurotypical people, it's a less conscious leap that they're making. But I think this is something that can make us really good at, my background is in math, and it's just been something that's really easy for me, to be honest. I remember when I first took our first formal proofs class, which was a 300 level class. So it was the first upper division math class, and it's basically just kind of an introduction to proofs. And everybody had been telling me that it was such a hard class because it was very different from any of the math instruction they'd had up until then. It's very rigorous, it's just logic. And for some reason in the US, this is stupid, I'm not going to go off on a tangent about it, but we don't learn logic as a precursor to math, even though that's what math is. Anyway, everybody was telling me it was going to be so hard, and they were saying, a bunch of people flunked out during that class. Me, I'm not saying this to brag, I'm just saying this to try to explain to you what the experience was like for me. And I think, again, this is because of these autistic tendencies to be so rigorous. This was an 8 o'clock class, I think, 8 o'clock in the morning. I showed up every day stoned after the first week, and I got an A. It was not hard for me, because it's just the way my brain thinks, and I had never had any previous specific training in logic or anything like that. It's just very automatic for me, and it's maybe even more automatic now because I've had several years of rigorous training, but I think it's just a natural way we tend to perceive things. And when you're doing a proof, you have to be really careful about being relevant and staying on topic. If you're, trying to prove or disprove something, you have to be very, very precise about what the statement is to begin with, so that you can do an accurate proof. And that's the way I think about it when I see rhetoric online, especially in writing. Because to me, when I see those words on a page or on a screen, all I'm thinking about is the words, unless I have some very specific emotional context for who the person is or what our relationship is, maybe. Or, that they're a whatever, that they're a tanky, or that they're a men's rights activist, or, something. Maybe that would give me a little bit of emotional context. But mostly I'm just looking at the words that they've typed out, and I am trying to respond as clearly to those words, unless I'm just joking around. But if we're having a serious conversation, like a debate, that's what I see. I don't see it. I'm not seeing emotion jumping out of the screen. I'm responding to it at face value, unless I have a specific reason to think that I shouldn't, that the person's a bad actor or something. So to me, it's like a proof. It's like they've made a statement, and I'm, whatever, maybe I'm drawing out an implication of it, maybe I'm trying to disprove it, maybe I'm trying to disprove part of it, but I'm analyzing it as though it's a logical statement that's been made. And by logical statement, I don't necessarily mean that it's logically consistent. I mean, sorry, it would probably take some time to explain what I mean. I mean, it's a statement in logical language. If, then, therefore, I'm thinking about it in those terms. I'm kind of taking what they said and translating it into those terms and then responding in kind. I might not respond in a formal logic language, but that's kind of the way I'm thinking about it, especially given my training. So I'm not exactly sure where to separate the autism from the training at this point, because they're both kind of part of me. But I really think that the autism is a big part of why I internalized it so much. So anyway, I've got to go, but thanks. Please let me know if you can relate to any of this. I really love to hear from people who can relate.